You stand on solid ground, but it breathes beneath your feet. The earth's crust floats gently on molten memory, shifting silently across eons. Tonight, you begin your journey into a world that moves slowly, so slowly, you've never noticed. But now, you feel it. You lie still, your body relaxed, your limbs loose, your breath soft. Beneath your floorboards, earth, stone, everything feels solid, quiet, still. But what if it isn't? What if the stillness is only a lull? What if far, beneath the surface, the world is moving slowly, endlessly, without pause? Tonight, you begin to notice, not with your eyes, not even with your ears, but with a deeper part of you, your sense of time stretched thin, your mind tuned to the rhythm of geologic breath. Beneath your back, beneath the land, beneath the crust of cities and forests and oceans, the earth moves. Not in leaps or stumbles, but in slow, drifting silence. The ground beneath you is not still. It shifts like clouds caught in stone. It carries you, every moment, inch by inch, across the surface of a living planet. You feel nothing, and yet you are riding on one of Earth's great plates, a tectonic plate. These plates are not thin, not fragile. They are vast, stretching thousands of kilometers, thick and strong. The one you lie on now may span a continent or dive beneath an ocean. But even the strongest plates float, not on water, not on air, but on something deeper, on the warm, dense, slow-moving rock of the Earth's mantle. Imagine it now. The crust, you know, the land of trees and rivers and roads, is just a skin, thin as an eggshell and cracked, like one too. The cracks are not random, they are boundaries, and at these edges the plates grind, slide, collide and stretch. But the movement is not fast. It's more like breath. A few centimeters a year, the speed of your fingernails growing, and yet, over time, deep time changes everything. Continents drift, oceans widen, mountains rise, valleys split. You, lying still in this moment, are part of that journey. You are riding a slow-motion raft, carried on a current of heat that you'll never see, but that never sleeps. Let yourself sink into the thought. You are not standing on a stage. You are drifting on a crust. The Earth's surface is dynamic, not in a way that disrupts your morning coffee, but in a way that, over millions of years, writes entire landscapes into being. Breathe in. Feel the movement not as force, but as presence. There is a slow hum to the Earth's skin, not a vibration you can feel, but a shift you can imagine. Africa drifting north, India pressing into Asia, Australia moving ever closer to Southeast Asia. They are not rushing, they are not late, they are simply moving, and each collision, each separation, shapes the world you know. The Himalayas, born from a clash, the Atlantic Ocean born from a split, the San Andreas Fault, born from a long, silent slide. This movement, this hidden choreography, is called plate tectonics. It is the theory, the framework, the story of how Earth's surface moves. But tonight, it is not just theory. It is a lullaby. You imagine the Earth as a great jigsaw puzzle, each piece alive, each plate slowly adjusting, adjusting, adjusting. Sometimes it presses, sometimes it pulls, sometimes it slips, and every now and then it breaks. That breaking, sudden releases will come in later chapters. But for now, you stay in the quiet, in the steady, slow motion of a planet that never really stops. Let your body soften into the idea that the ground beneath you is not fixed. Let it feel comforting. Let it remind you that even what seems unmoving is in motion. Your town, your room, your bed, everything rides on this drifting stone. You are part of the planet's slow dance, and this dance is not random. It is powered by something deeper, something you'll explore soon. The heat beneath the surface, the layers that spin and flow and carry the plates above them. But for now, you imagine the edges, the borders between plates, where they meet, where they argue, where they rest, side by side. Some are quiet, others are loud in their own time. All are patient. You float above the surface now, far above the earth, looking down not at continents, but at patterns, dot lines, curves, a planet covered in seams. These seams are not scars, they are stories. They tell of ancient oceans long gone, of mountains that rose and crumbled, of supercontinents that once held all land as one. Pangaea, Gondwana, Laurasia, names like poems from before memory, and even now, the plates are setting the stage for the next world. A world that may look nothing like ours. In hundreds of millions of years, the continents will reunite, or split again. New mountains will rise. Old oceans may disappear. It won't happen in your lifetime, but it will happen because the ground beneath you never sleeps. It hums, it shifts, it remembers. And you, though brief in the scale of deep time, are part of that memory. You lie still, but you are moving. You are being carried across the skin of a planet in motion, not with noise, not with speed, but with quiet certainty. And now, as your breath slows, as your thoughts soften, you begin to wonder what lies beneath this crust, what carries it, what makes it move at all. That's where you're going next, downward, inward, to the layers that lie below, where the ground's slow breath begins. Close your eyes, breathe deeply. Imagine the earth not as a globe on a classroom shelf, but as something real, immense, and breathing beneath you. Tonight, you go inward, not upward toward stars, but downward beneath the ground, past soil and stone, into the secret structure of the world. The earth is layered, and each layer holds a different truth. You begin with the crust, the outermost shell. This is the land you walk on, the ground that holds your cities, your trees, your oceans. It is thin, so thin, just a few kilometers deep beneath the oceans, a few dozen beneath mountains. If the earth were an apple, the crust would be its skin, delicate compared to what lies beneath. But don't dismiss it. The crust holds memory. It holds fossils and faults, pressure and fracture, sediment and story. It is cracked into plates, tectonic plates, and those plates drift slowly on what lies beneath. The next layer is the mantle. You slide into it now. It is not fire, not exactly. It is rock, but rock that flows, not like water, more like very slow honey, or warm wax, or glass caught mid-melt. The mantle moves. It churns in great convection currents. Hot material from deep inside rises. Cooler material near the top sinks. This movement is the great engine of plate tectonics. The mantle does not rush. It rolls, steady, circular, timeless. Here, temperature rises. Here, pressure deepens. And yet here, you feel calm. The earth is not fighting itself. It is becoming itself. You drift deeper into a part of the mantle where the pressure becomes too much for softness. The rocks are more rigid here, though they still move across ages. This slow dance of softness above and solidity below. What allows the crust to shift? The plates float on this moving mantle, carried like driftwood on a lava-slow river, and still you descend. Next comes the outer core. You you glide into something entirely different. This layer is liquid, not water, not oil, but molten metal, iron and nickel, flowing in waves too slow for eyes, too massive for oceans. This metal moves, and because it moves, it generates a magnetic field. That field wraps around the planet, invisible but powerful. It shields us from solar winds, from cosmic radiation. Without it, the atmosphere would erode. The oceans might vanish. Life as you know it could never be. This liquid metal, hidden so deep, protects you even now. And deeper still is the inner core. You float into it with reverence. This is the Earth's heart. It is solid, so hot it should be liquid, but the pressure is too immense. The weight of the world above keeps it tightly locked in place. A glowing sphere of iron, more than 1,000 kilometers wide, it spins, slowly, maybe even at a slightly different speed than the rest of the planet. No one knows for sure, but it turns, and we turn with it. You rest in this center for a moment. All around you, heat, weight, light without flame. You are at the core of a planet, and from here everything rises. Heat from this core flows outward, stirring the outer core, which spins the magnetic field, which warms the lower mantle, which moves the convection currents, which shifts the plates above, which reshapes the crust, which carries you. You, lying still on the surface, are held aloft by this structure, a sphere of layers, each one part of a cycle, each one both burden and buoy. Let your breath match that cycle now. In, out, rise, fall. The earth breathes in layers, and each layer moves at its own tempo. The crust cracks with earthquakes. The mantle flows over millions of years. The outer core spins electric fields. The inner core holds silent tension. Together, they create the only world you've ever known. You feel, perhaps for the first time, the scale of it all, how thin the land you live on is, how much depth lies beneath, how calm the planet seems, and yet how alive it truly is. A single volcano may erupt at the surface, but its energy began far below. A single quake may shake a city, but its story started in the strain between. Two plates, the surface, beautiful and immediate, is only the final page. The real story begins in the layers. You imagine each one as a voice in a harmony. Crust, mantle, outer core, inner core, each one humming its own note, each one holding the others in balance. Together, they create the deep music of Earth, a music you walk on, a music you were born into, a music that plays on whether you listen or not. But tonight, you do listen. You listen not with ears, but with attention. And what you hear is wonder. You hear the mantles whisper, I move without being seen. You hear the cores chant, I burn without flame. You hear the crusts murmur, I crack to become. This is not destruction. This is transformation. It is easy sometimes to forget the earth is alive, that it grows and shifts and changes, even as we build our homes upon it. But tonight you remember that the solid ground is only the surface, that fire and flow lie beneath, that nothing is still, even when it looks that way. And now, with these layers beneath you, you begin to rise again, upward, gently, through the mantle's warmth, through the crust's familiar stone, until you are back on the surface, resting once more, but with new understanding, new calm, new connection, and just as you settle in again, a question forms. If the earth is made of layers, how do they shape the world above? If the crust is cracked into plates, how do those pieces move across time? What patterns do they follow? What puzzle do they form? And what happens when those plates begin to collide? You rise gently now back to the surface, but something feels different. Not in your breath or your body, but in your understanding. The stillness of the ground is no longer a given. It is a temporary hush, a pause in an older, slower movement. That happens all around you. Look down with new eyes. Imagine the earth not as a smooth sphere, but as something cracked, quietly, evenly, profoundly, that the crust is not one whole piece. It is a mosaic, a puzzle of massive slabs called tectonic plates. There are about a dozen major plates and many smaller ones, like fragments of an old story still drifting through time. These plates are not arranged with symmetry or care. They are messy, jagged. They do not fit together neatly like a child's toy. They rub and press and slide and split. They are the Earth's restless skin. You float above the globe now, far enough to see its curves, but close enough to trace its scars. They're along the floor of the Atlantic Ocean. A line stretches like a stitch. It is a mid-ocean ridge where two plates are pulling apart. New crust is being born here, slowly, constantly. There along the Pacific Rim a different pattern emerges. Here plates meet in tension and fire. They dive beneath one another in a process called subduction. Volcanoes rise. Earthquakes rumble. You begin to see it, not as a violent system, but as a living one. A system that recycles itself, renews itself, shapes itself. Each plate moves because the mantle beneath it flows. Hot rock rises at the ridges, spreading the seafloor. Elsewhere, older plates cool, grow dense, and sink back into the mantle. This movement drives the whole system. You picture it now like conveyor belts of stone pulling, pushing, reshaping, but not in hours, not in days, in millions of years. Tectonic plates move, on average, a few centimeters per year. The speed of fingernails, the pace of slow thought, but that motion, multiplied over time, carves continents. Drift above Africa. Below your feet, the African plate stretches wide, sharing borders with the Eurasian plate to the north, the South American plate to the west, and the Arabian plate to the northeast. Look to the Pacific plate. It is the largest of them all, sliding westward, carrying islands and faults and entire nations. Beneath your gaze, the plates push against each other, pull apart, and scrape side by side. Each boundary has its own rhythm. Divergent boundaries where plates move away from each other, like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a quiet rift where magma rises and hardens, forming new crust, a birthplace for ocean floors. Convergent boundaries where plates move toward each other, where ocean crust dives beneath continental crust, where mountains are born, where trenches open deep beneath the sea. Transform boundaries where plates slide past one another, like the San Andreas Fault in California, where pressure builds until, suddenly, it releases. Each movement is slow, but not gentle. You may not feel it while you sleep, but the earth remembers. Every inch a plate travels is a step in a longer dance, over hundreds of millions of years. These plates rearrange the map entirely. The continents you know now have not always been here. Once, long ago, all land was joined in a single supercontinent, Pangaea. A massive, singular landmass surrounded by a global ocean. It existed over 300 million years ago, and then it began to break apart. The plates moved, land stretched, oceans opened. What was once joined became. Distant South America drifted west. India sailed north. Antarctica moved toward the pole, and still the pieces drift. Still they shape the face of the earth. You can almost see the outlines if you look closely. How Africa fits into South America, like old puzzle pieces that once locked together. How the Atlantic Ocean is still widening. How the Pacific is shrinking, pulled inward by surrounding plates. Plate tectonics doesn't just change the map, it changes everything that depends on it. Where there are rifts, life can find new land. Where there are mountains, climate shifts. Where there are faults, ecosystems adapt. This is not just geology, it is biography. The story of land, and through it, the story of life, including yours. You may never see a plate move with your eyes, but you walk on their history every day. The valleys, the volcanoes, the plains, the ridges, all shaped by the push and pull of these plates. Your home is a snapshot of motion, and so is your future, because the plates are still moving, and the world is still changing. You float now along one of the edges. Is a place where the Eurasian plate meets the Indian plate. Here you see the beginnings of the Himalayas, where one plate has pressed into another for tens of millions of years, not with sudden violence, but with endless patience. And from that pressure, mountains have risen. Tall, immense, silent, but born from movement. So slow it almost escapes belief. You begin to see the puzzle, not just as pieces, but as potential. The boundaries are not borders, they are possibilities, and the story they tell is not finished. Even now, new rifts are forming in East Africa. A new ocean may one day open. Even now, the Pacific inches inward. Even now, the plates do not rest. They have no need to hurry. They are on geologic time, and you are part of that time, even in your brief moment of stillness. Tonight, you rest on one of those drifting puzzle pieces. It moves without your consent, without your awareness, but never without purpose. Let that feel comforting. Let it remind you that change can happen slowly, that shifting does not need to be fast to be profound. And as you lie there, floating in thought above the crust, you begin to wonder, what happens when these plates collide? What does the earth do when motion meets resistance? You return now to the edge of one plate and another, two massive pieces of the earth's crust floating on the mantle, each with its own quiet momentum, and between them a meeting, not a gentle one, not sudden either, but inevitable. These are convergent boundaries, places where tectonic plates move toward one another inch by inch, year by year, unstoppable, patient. Imagine two rafts drifting slowly across a thick, invisible current. They approach, they press, they resist, and then they fold. Not like paper folds, like continents do. You are floating above one such collision now, below Eurasia, and moving steadily into it from the south. India, not the idea of India, but the entire subcontinent. 60 million years ago, it broke away from Gondwana, drifting north at a steady pace. A long, slow voyage across the ancient Tethys Sea, and then it reached Eurasia. It didn't bounce. It didn't stop. It pressed in, and it still presses. The collision gave birth to the Himalayas, the tallest mountain range on Earth. You drift toward them now. The peaks rise like frozen breaths of stone Everest, Lhotse, and Annapurna, each one a monument to pressure. They were not always mountains. They were once seafloor, pushed upward, lifted layer upon layer until it scraped the sky, and they are still rising, a few millimeters each year. Because India continues to push, you float between the peaks, and deeper down into the crust, where the collision is still unfolding. It is not clean, it is not smooth. The rocks fracture, they bend, they melt and shift. Earthquakes ripple through. The base of the range, sudden sighs in an otherwise quiet motion. This is what happens when plates of continental crust collide. Neither is dense enough to sink easily, so instead they crumple, like fabric pushed together. Mountains are born not with explosions, but with folded stone. It is the Earth's slowest architecture, and the Himalayas are not alone. Far to the west, the Alps rise from the collision of the African and Eurasian plates. In the north, the Urals, born of long-forgotten collisions. Even the ancient Appalachians, worn and softened by time, still carry the memory of once great upheaval. Each mountain range has its origin in pressure. Each peak once lay flat. Let that settle in your mind. What rises now once rested low. What towers today once trembled. It is the nature of countenance to collide, to press into one another as the planet cools and drifts. But not all collisions look the same. You pass now to a different kind of boundary, where oceanic crust thinner, denser meets continental crust thicker, but lighter. Here, the oceanic plate does not resist. It bends downward. It dives beneath the continent. This process is called subduction, and you'll explore it more deeply soon. But for now, you hover where the oceanic plate begins to vanish beneath land. Above it, a chain of volcanoes rises like punctuation marks in the crust. This is the Andes in South America. Here, the Nazca plate presses into the South American plate. One sinks, one lifts, mountains grow, and magma rises. You glide through this collision, through folded crust and heated rock. It is not chaos, it is sculpting, and every sculpture begins with pressure, even the island. Arcs chains of volcanic islands form from ocean-ocean collisions. Where two oceanic plates meet, one dives and molten rock rises, creating new land above sea level. Japan, Indonesia, the Aleutian Islands, all born from this quiet, patient crash. As you drift through these regions, you begin to feel the shape of it all. The Earth doesn't break when plates meet. It remakes itself. It folds. It lifts. It melts and cools. It grows. You begin to understand mountains, not just as scenery, but as evidence. Evidence that something deep below is always moving. That time, when given enough force, can move rock, can move continents, can move worlds, and still the collisions continue. Africa presses north into Europe. Australia inches toward Asia. The Pacific pushes beneath the edges of North and South America. The shapes you see on the map, those are temporary. The continents are like ships in slow motion, and when they meet, they do not sink. They rise. You return now to the Himalayas. Float gently above them, as moonlight casts soft silver across snow and granite. Below, the crust is more than 70 kilometers thick, twice the average. The Earth has been stacked upon itself, not violently, but insistently. This is how great change happens. Not always with speed, but with persistence. Let that feel familiar. Let that echo something in you. You are shaped, too, by pressure over time, not just in body, but in spirit, not just by what rises quickly, but by what builds slowly, layer upon layer. Mountains don't form overnight, neither does strength, neither does wisdom, and still they rise. The world is not finished growing, it folds and presses in silence, and every peak is a page in that geologic story. You drift downward now, back toward the lower slopes, the valleys, the riverbeds carved by ice and meltwater, all of it the height, the cracks, the flow, born from the meeting of plates, from the tension of countenance that do not yield easily. This is where you rest tonight, between two pieces of a planet, pressing gently into each other, not in anger, but in purpose. The ground beneath you has been folded. It remembers motion, it remembers fire, it remembers pressure, and just beneath these ancient peaks, another story is unfolding. A story born not above ground, but beneath the ocean, where new crust rises, where molten rock breathes, where the earth creates in silence and in heat. Sink now beneath the waves. Let the world above dissolve into blue. Let the sound fall away until all that remains is hush, not silence, but a softer kind of sound. Below you stretches a realm few have seen, not the shallow coral gardens, not the kelp forests, deeper, far deeper, to where sunlight cannot reach, to where pressure thickens and life thins, to the floor of the ocean. But even here, in this dark, weighty world, the earth breathes, not with lungs, not with air, but with molten rhythm, with fire rising quietly from its center. Stretching across the sea floor is a seam, a crack, a spine that runs through the ocean, basin like a glowing scar. This is a mid-ocean ridge, a place where tectonic plates are moving apart, a place where new crust is being born. It is here that the earth inhales from within. You drift above it now. It stretches endlessly, curving with the shape of the planet, like a hidden mountain range turned inside out. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge, the East Pacific Rise, the Indian Ridge, each one a breath, each one a boundary. Here, beneath miles of water, magma rises from the mantle. It reaches the surface of the crust, molten and glowing, and when it cools, it hardens into new sea floor, new earth, fresh crust, stone made in the silence of the sea. This is seafloor spreading. The plates on either side of the ridge slowly drift apart. Not rapidly, just a few centimeters each year, and in the space left behind, the earth creates more of itself. You watch it now, the slow ooze of magma, the quiet cooling, the gentle widening of the ocean floor. You see pillow-shaped formations, where lava meets cold water and curls in on itself. You see hydrothermal vents, where hot, mineral-rich fluids burst from the crust and boil in the freezing deep. Here, even in darkness, life thrives. Tiny shrimp, tube worms, bacteria that feast on sulfur instead of sunlight. In this place, life begins again and again, without light, without air, with only the earth's breath to sustain it. And still, the crust moves. As more rock rises and hardens at the center, the older crust is pushed outward. Away from the ridge, it travels across the ocean floor, growing, colder, denser, heavier, until eventually it meets the edge of another plate and begins to sink. But that is a story for later. Tonight, you stay at the ridge. You hover where the world is newest, where fire becomes stone, and stone becomes floor, and floor becomes world. The ridges are not visible from space, but they are the longest mountain chains on Earth, wider than the Andes, longer than the Rockies, hidden underwater, but no less real, and they are responsible for shaping continents as the Atlantic ridge spreads. The Americas drift west, Europe and Africa drift east. Every year the ocean widens, only slightly, but always. You float now between the plates. You feel the pull, the parting, not violent, but inevitable. You realize that creation doesn't need spectacle. It doesn't need thunder or applause. Sometimes creation happens in darkness, in patience, in silence, and it continues every second. Even now, this new crust, formed at the ridge, is the beginning of a cycle. Eventually, it will cool. It will carry sediments, host marine life, record the slow magnetism of the earth, until one day it is drawn downward, into the deep trench of subduction. But for now, it is young. It is forming beneath you, unseen, unhurried. You think of breath, again, of how every inhale is followed by an exhale, how every creation will one day return. The earth is doing just that, inhaling at the ridges, exhaling at the trenches, building crust, recycling crust, always moving, always alive. You rise a little higher in the water now. The ridge glows faintly beneath you, a line of warmth in the planet's coldest room, and you feel how this underwater world holds the same laws as the land: pressure, heat, time, movement, all working together to shape what we cannot see. Let that be a comfort, that even in darkness, something is forming. Even in silence, the earth is speaking. You hover now near a vent, a black smoker, billowing superheated minerals like underwater smoke. It is not dangerous to you. It is ancient, patient, eternal. From this chimney of heat and metal, life first took shape on Earth. Perhaps not. But the possibility lingers, that in these dark, forgotten places, the planet whispered its first breath. And perhaps it still does. You float upward now, away from the ridge, but not away from its meaning. You carry with you the sense of unseen creation, the sense that the world builds quietly, and you wonder if the seafloor spreads and grows, if the crust forms and moves, then what happens to the parts that sink, to the plates that do not rise but fall? You drift now to the edge of an old crust, a plate that has traveled far from its birthplace. At the ocean ridge, it has carried weight across time, sediments, pressure, cold, and now, at last, it reaches a place where the path leads downward. This is a subduction zone, a place where one tectonic plate sinks beneath another, a place where the surface folds inward like a breath held too long. You hover over the edge. Below you darkness that curves and disappears into the deep. This is a trench, long, narrow, impossibly deep. The Mariana Trench, the Peruccioli Trench, the Java Trench, each one a mark of descent. Each one a place where a plate is being pulled back into the earth. You float gently into that downward bend, not rushed, not forced, just following gravity and time. The oceanic plate is denser than the continental plate it meets, so it sinks. Not all at once, but steadily. This is the Earth's recycling center. What was once new crust, formed in the breath of an ocean ridge, now returns to the mantle, to be melted and made again. You watch the process unfold. The plate bends, it cracks, it grinds beneath the overriding plate, and as it sinks, it carries water with it trapped in rocks, minerals, sediment. This water doesn't vanish. It slips into the mantle, where heat and pressure await, And there, a kind of transformation begins. Water lowers the melting point of the surrounding mantle rock. It causes melting, partial, uneven, but enough. Magma begins to rise. Not fast, not wild, but inevitably. And from this rising magma, volcanoes are born. You lift your eyes now to the surface, to the ring of fire that circles the Pacific volcanoes in Japan, in Indonesia, in Alaska, in Chile, all rising from the pressure of sinking plates. This is not destruction, it is return. The earth folds in, and from that inward motion, something rises. You drift beside a slab that has just begun to descend. Groans faintly, not in pain, but in motion. The heat increases. The rock softens. Minerals shift under pressure. This is metamorphism, where one kind of rock transforms into another, shaped not by fire, but by pressure, time, and depth. Schist. Gneiss. Rocks folded like pages of a book, rewritten by the weight of the earth. You touch a stone now, feel its layers, its memory. It has been many things. Basalt, shale, now something new, now something shaped by descent. As you continue downward, the temperature climbs. You pass the Benioff zone, a sloping path where earthquakes begin, deep within the earth. These quakes don't rattle cities, they shiver the inner crust. They mark the stress where plates grind, resisting, relenting, moving again. You imagine the plates like ancient beasts, massive, blind, slow dancing with friction and faith. They move because they must, because the mantle moves, because heat rises, because the earth is alive. Subduction zones are boundaries, not endings, but beginnings of a cycle's next step. You rise again now, following a plume of magma as it threads upward. It is not a violent rise, it curls like smoke. It carries minerals. It carries heat. It carries the memory of rock that once stood beneath the sea, and when it reaches the surface, it may rest in chambers. It may erupt, it may become granite. It may feed a volcano that slumbers for centuries, then speaks in fire. Volcanoes born from subduction often carry ash, not just lava, explosive, layered, complex. They are storytellers. Mount Fuji, Mount St. Helens, Mount Vesuvius, all built from the quiet descent of plates beneath the surface. You hover now over such a mountain. Its peak is sharp, but its roots go deep. Beneath it, a journey of a plate from seafloor to mantle, to magma to mountain. Let that image settle in your breath. The sinking is not the end. It is part of the becoming. You think again of balance, how the earth creates new crust at the ridges and reclaims it at the trenches. No part is wasted, no motion without purpose. The earth has no landfill, only loops, and as plates descend, they do more than melt. They change the chemistry of the mantle. They create mountains and volcanoes. They form island arcs and deep-sea basins. Even continents shift in response. You see it now, how a sinking plate can lift the edge of another, how mountains rise from one plate's fall. You feel it, that there is beauty in disappearance, in what goes unseen. The earth does not mourn the plate it reclaims. It reshapes it, repurposes it, and somewhere in the deep trench, another plate begins to bend. Another cycle begins. Let that be a thought to carry with you, that what disappears does not end. It continues changed, but not erased. You return slowly to the surface now. You float above the trench again, watching where crust falls away. quiet as a breath out. And you ask yourself, if plates can vanish beneath the earth, then where do they go? What happens to the heat they carry, the pressure they stir? Does it build? Does it rise? Does it break? You return now to the edge again. But this boundary feels different, tighter, quieter. As if something is being held in, you drift above the land, following a line not drawn by rivers or mountains, but by strain, a fault, not a fracture of failure, but of tension, where two plates touch, press, but cannot glide freely. This is not the slow pull of seafloor spreading, nor the soft descent of subduction. This is pressure with nowhere to go. Here the plates move past each other, side by side, in opposite directions. This is a transformed boundary. The most famous is the San Andreas Fault in California, but there are others, quiet, hidden, deep within the crust. You drift lower. You feel the hush, the build-up. Imagine holding a stretched cord. You pull gently, then more, until snap. The earth does the same. When plates become locked at a fault, they continue to try to move. They don't stop wanting. They strain, and then, sometimes after years, decades, even centuries, they release an earthquake, a sudden shift, a break, a ripple of energy bursting from beneath your feet. The ground does not move in anger. It moves in memory. It remembers the pressure it held, and how long it waited to let go. You float now beside a fault deep below the surface. It looks quiet, a jagged line of stone and mineral. But within it, the rock has bent, ground against itself. This fault may not break today, but it holds a potential. Like a breath drawn and never quite exhaled, you trace the length of it with your eyes, kilometers long, yet narrow as a single thought. And then you feel it, a flicker, a tremor, not violent, just sudden. The plates have slipped. The energy that was trapped now releases in waves, seismic waves, radiating out like the rings of a stone dropped into still water. Primary waves come first, quick, compressing like a push, then secondary waves follow, side to side, shaking what they pass through. And finally, if close to the surface waves arrive, the slowest but most felt. They roll, they twist, they lift and drop, and above ground we feel it. Buildings tremble, streets ripple, glasses clink on shelves, birds rise from trees. But underground the motion is simpler. It is the earth adjusting itself, making room, letting go. You glide through this ripple of release. It lasts only moments, but its journey travels deep. You understand now. An earthquake is not chaos. It is correction, a reset, a reminder that tension can only build for so long before it must find a path forward. You drift beside old faults now, places where the earth once cracked. You see the scars, but also the REGROWTH. The land heals but remembers, in Turkey, in Chile, in Japan, in New Zealand, all places touched by faults, by the long quiet and the sudden voice. Earthquakes are not signs of weakness. They are the earth speaking plainly, telling us what lies beneath. You float now to a city, resting above a known fault. The people live their lives. They plant flowers. They walk their dogs. They sleep, unaware of the strain just below. Or perhaps aware, but learning to live with it. You think of the earth not as threatening, but as a body under tension, and like all bodies, it must move. Some quakes are small, felt only by seismometers. Some are strong, felt in the bones of buildings and the rhythm of oceans, but they all come from the same place, the letting go of what could no longer be held. You hover beside a fault again. You watch how the rock grinds. You see the fault gouge, powdered stone formed from millennia of movement. You see offset layers where streams are shifted, roads misaligned, ridges broken and remade. And you understand, faults are not just lines. They are stories of patience, of build-up, of sudden clarity. Sometimes faults creep, moving slowly, without earthquakes. Sometimes they stick, waiting, gathering energy. No one can predict the precise moment of a quake, but we can listen. We can watch, we can prepare, and still, we must accept the unknown. You glide across the surface of the San Andreas Fault. You see fences shifted, lines in the earth slightly out of place. You see a planet reshaping itself. It is not violent by nature, only honest, and perhaps if we listen carefully, we can learn from it, to recognize our own tension, to feel the places where we hold too tightly, to release before the break. You rise now into the quiet sky. The fault lies beneath you, no longer trembling, but remembering. And you wonder, what happens when these movements add up? When the continents don't just tremble, but travel, when the plates drift over time, and oceans widen, and lands part like leaves on a pond. The earth is quiet again, but deep below, the dance continues. You rise above the surface now, high enough that the land begins to look like puzzle pieces, not perfectly shaped, but suggestive, as if long ago they fit, and they did. All the continents you see today, they were once one, Pangaea, a single landmass, broad and silent, surrounded by a great ocean. You drift backward in time, carried on the breath of memory, and the continents begin to close. Africa slides beside South America. India nestles beneath Asia. Australia edges toward Antarctica, one shape, one song. But the earth does not stay still. The plates beneath the continents, they move, not fast, not loud, but always. And so Pangaea began to break. Cracks opened, rifts widened, water flowed in, carving new seas, and the continents began their long, slow drift. You watch them now, like dancers partying gently after a shared step. They drift away from the center, toward new places, new configurations. This is continental drift, a movement so slow you would not notice it in a lifetime, but in millions of years it redraws the world. You follow Africa now, as it pushes north, pressing into Europe, lifting. The Alps. You drift behind South America, sailing west on the back of the South American plate. As the Atlantic Ocean widens, each continent carries its own cargo: mountains, rivers, deserts, and life. Forests that once touched now stand oceans apart. Fossils of the same species appear on separate shores. You drift across the Atlantic, its ridge still growing, still pushing the continents farther from each other. It feels almost gentle, this parting, but there is weight in it, because continents shape not only geography, but climate, evolution, ocean currents. When they move, they carry ecosystems with them. Australia breaks away and drifts north, its marsupials evolving in isolation. India crashes into Asia, birthing the Himalayas. And shifting the monsoon, you realize, continental drift is not just about where land is. It's about what changes because of it. You glide now over the Great Rift Valley in East Africa, a place where a continent is beginning to tear dot someday. Far from now, a new ocean may fill this space. a new shape will emerge. This is how continents are born, not just by collision, but by separation. You float beside the Red Sea, a newborn sea between Africa and Arabia. The land has pulled apart. Water has flooded in. It began with heat, with pressure, with uplift, and now the two plates drift slowly away. Even now, beneath your feet, the continents continue to move. North America shifts west. Eurasia spreads outward. Antarctica stays near the pole, but turns. And though it takes millions of years, the world reshapes itself. You rise higher still, until the entire globe curves beneath you. You imagine a time-lapse, millions of years passing in moments. Continents slide, collide, separate. Pangea before, Pangea again. Perhaps some scientists imagine a future supercontinent, Pangea Ultima, or Amasya, where the drifting lands reunite. You picture it, oceans shrinking, lands folding together, climates merging. But tonight, you stay with the present drift. The journey each continent is still on. You pass over Greenland, caught between plates. Migrating slowly west, you cross the Arctic, its hidden ridges still spreading beneath ice. And through it all, you feel a rhythm, not just motion, but a memory of motion. The continents carry clues, stripes of rock that match across oceans, fossils separated by thousands of miles, glacial scars that make sense only when the pieces are reunited. The Earth is not forgetful. It keeps records in stone, and you read them now, like lines in an ancient book. Africa's rocks match Brazil's. Antarctica shares a story with India. Mountains align across oceans, and the story becomes clear. The Earth has changed shape many times, and it will again. You drift lower now, feeling the Earth's breath, not just in volcanoes or earthquakes, but in this long, gliding motion. Continents are rafts on the mantle, floating atop a sea of heat and pressure. Their speed is slow, mere centimeters each year, but the journey is vast, and the destinations are unknown. You imagine the continents as old friends, meeting, parting, drifting, finding new balance. You listen to their movement. It is quiet, but certain. You feel how nothing is ever truly still, not even the ground beneath your feet, and that's okay, because in that movement, life adjusts. Ecosystems evolve, climates change, mountains rise, oceans deepen, the Earth becomes something new again and again. And you, resting now in this long drift, are part of it. You are made of matter once carried by these plates. You are shaped by the air they shaped, the water they moved, the soils they folded. Your body holds the memory of ancient drifts. And as you close your eyes, you feel it, the pull of time, the flow of earth beneath you, still moving, still becoming. And somewhere beneath this moving surface, stones rise from heat, volcanoes dream in silence, and mountains remember how they came to be. You find yourself now beside a mountain. Its shadow falls long across the land, and its presence is quiet but certain. You tilt your head back. It stretches far above you, not in a single thrust, but in patient layers. This mountain did not rise in a moment. It rose slowly over millions of years, folded, pushed, crumpled upward by plates that pressed together, not to break, but to build. You touch its base. The rock is cold, but inside it, there is warmth of another kind, memory. This is origin, the process of mountain-building, a quiet miracle of collision and uplift. It begins with plates, two massive slabs of earth pressing into each other, neither willing to sink, both to light, to subduct, and so they rise. Buckle, wrinkle, mountains are Earth's slowest exhale. You float along the ridges now. Each fold, each peak, each scar tells a story of heat, of pressure, of time. The Himalayas born when India met Asia, still rising, still pressing skyward a few millimeters each year. The Alps, lifted from ancient seabeds, now cradling fossils once sunk in warm shallows. The Rockies, the Andes, the Urals, each formed by different dances of the plates. You drift deeper into the layers of stone, sedimentary rock stacked like books, metamorphic rock twisted like ribbon-dot granite veins, threads of ancient magma frozen in place. Each tells you something. Each remembers something. You run your hand along the wall of a canyon, see the bands of color, the curve of strata. These are not just rocks, they are pages, and they record not only rise but fall, because mountains erode. Rain touches the peak, softens it grain by grain. Wind polishes it smooth. Ice carves it, pulling stone like silk dot, and rivers carry pieces of it away, to the sea, to plains, to valleys far below. But this does not erase the mountain. It reshapes it. It reminds you that nothing grand is immune to change. You glide now through a glacial valley, U-shaped, wide and quiet, a memory of ancient ice that once covered peaks and pressed them down. You drift beside a moraine, a pile of rock left behind by a glacier's retreat, proof that even stone is moved by time. Mountains record this too, not just their rise, but their losses, and still they stand. You see fossils in their cliffs, shells, corals, once part of the sea, now a mile above it, proof that oceans become mountaintops. That change is not just possible, but constant. You climb higher now, toward the summit. The air grows thin, the wind grows colder, but the stone beneath you is steady, as if saying, I have seen this all before. You rest on a ledge, look out over a chain of peaks. They seem eternal, but they too were young once, and they too will fade, not vanish but return to something else. Even the tallest peak will become sand one day, washed to ocean, pressed into rock, lifted again, and so the cycle continues. Uplift, erosion, sedimentation, compression, uplift. Again, the rock cycle, told slowly through stone. You walk along a fault that runs through a mountain, a scar from long ago, proof that even here, even in greatness, there is strain, and yet the mountain does not crumble. It adapts. You pass lichen soft green on hard stone, and alpine flowers blooming between cracks. Even here, life holds on. You feel the deep stillness of the mountain, but within it, layers shift. Minerals change. Even as it appears unchanging, it evolves. Some mountains are born at convergent boundaries, others from volcanic arcs. Some rise quietly beneath ice, never breaking the surface, but all remember where they came from. You float beside an ancient peak, worn down, rounded, humble, but beneath it lies granite, magma cooled beneath a vanished volcano. Once it roared with fire, now it whispers of patience. You let your fingers brush its surface, cool, rough, real. You imagine the people who have stood here before, the ones who called mountains sacred, who watched clouds catch on summits and believed the gods lived there. Perhaps they weren't wrong, not in the literal sense, but in the sense that mountains remind us of something larger, something slower, something enduring. You close your eyes for a moment, feel the mountain's rhythm beneath you. and you realize it isn't still. It's just moving on a different clock, a geologic clock, where seconds last millennia, where change is measured not in days, but in layers, and that too is motion. You listen to the quiet. It is not empty, it is full of memory, of weight, of time itself, and just beneath the crust, the earth still moves. Plates press, mantle flows, the deep engine of the planet turns, and someday this mountain will rise a little higher, or fall, or fracture, or drift. It remembers how, as you descend slowly from the peak, you carry that with you, not fear, but reverence, for a world that builds slowly and remembers everything, and somewhere beneath your feet, you sense the surface shifting again, small, subtle, but sure. The mountain rests for now, but the crust, ever so softly, still moves, and far below, where you cannot yet see, your journey returns to where it began. You are standing now, not floating, not drifting, but standing bare feet on cool ground. The air is still, the sky a deep blue, touched with fading stars, and under you, the earth, steady, familiar, solid, and yet you know something now, something you didn't feel before. The earth beneath your feet is not still. It moves, it breathes, it carries you through time. You feel it now, not as a jolt, not as a quake, but as a deep hum. The rhythm of plates shifting, the gentle pull of countenance, wandering, the quiet breath of magma beneath crust. This is the earth's lullaby, and you're part of it. You close your eyes, and in your mind, you trace the outlines of the plates beneath your town, your home, your bed, a mosaic of stone, riding slowly on currents of mantle. You picture yourself not on land, but on a slow ship made of rock, moving through time. You think of all the places you've walked, sidewalks, mountains, forests, shores, each one on a plate that drifts, invisible but steady. You remember the ridges deep in the oceans, where new crust is born, and the trenches where old crust is reclaimed. You think of the plates beneath your feet, pushing, pulling, sliding, not with urgency, but with purpose, and in that slow movement, your world has taken shape. The mountains you've seen, they rose from collision. The valleys you've walked, they stretched from tension. The volcanoes, the rivers, the coastlines, each sculpted by motion. You are shaped by these things too, because the earth does not only shape itself, it shapes everything that walks upon it. You feel it in your knees when you climb a hill. You feel it in your lungs when you breathe mountain air. You feel it in your stories, how people settle near rivers, how cultures grow around coasts, how cities rise on fault lines, risking everything to be near what nourishes, even in stillness. You carry the earth's history. The calcium in your bones was once part of an ocean. The iron in your blood was forged in earth's molten heart. The dust in your breath was ground from rock that rose and fell for eons. You are not separate from the plates. You are their passenger, their poem, their result. You stretch your arms, and for a moment you imagine the slow motion of time around you, continents drifting apart, oceans closing in, peaks rising where flatlands once stood, and in the middle of it, there you are, just one body on one crust at one moment in Earth's long story. But that moment matters, because your awareness, your quiet, noticing is part of the story now. The Earth has moved for billions of years, but only now, in you, does it witness itself. Only now, through your eyes, does the ground beneath become more than ground. It becomes memory, connection, belonging. You step forward, the ground holds, and still it moves. You remember the slow rise of mountains, the trembling release of faults, the birth of new crust in deep ocean ridges, the silent return of rock in subduction zones. All of it is beneath you. All of it still happening. You realize something else, something soft and strange. You don't have to feel the movement to be changed by it, like the wind that shapes dunes, like time that softens sorrow. The earth works slowly, but it works always, and so do you. Your cells change, your thoughts drift, your breath shifts rhythm with each passing night. You are not the same as you were a year ago, a month ago, even yesterday. That's not failure, that's tectonic. You are evolving. You are a landscape, rising in some places, settling in others. Sometimes you feel earthquakes inside, sudden shifts, breaking points, moments where everything changes. But even then the pieces don't disappear. They settle differently. They form new ground, new structure. And maybe that's what the earth has always been trying to teach, that cracks don't mean collapse. They mean transformation, that drift isn't distance. It's discovery, that pressure can be held until it shapes something beautiful. You place your hand on the ground now. It's solid and moving and ancient and yours. You feel not just supported but accompanied. The earth does not rush you. It invites you to move slowly, to shift gently, to become something new over time. And as you breathe in, you remember all the places you've been and all the unseen forces that carried you there. Not fate, not accident, just movement, quiet, constant, creative. Beneath you, the plates still move, even now, even as you rest. And above them, you do too. And perhaps, as you drift toward sleep, you'll carry this feeling that you belong to a planet that moves and builds and breaks and mends, and that even in silence, you are going somewhere,